Okay, so we've been through this crisis, and there are all sorts of explanatory formats out there, and it's interesting to look at the different genres. One genre is that it's all about human frailty. I mean, Alan Greenspan took refuge in the fact it's human nature, he said, you can't do anything about that. But there's a whole world of explanations that kind of say it's the predatory instincts, it's the instincts for mastery, it's the delusions of investors and the greed and all the rest of it. So there's a whole range of discussion of that. And of course, the more we learn about the daily practices on Wall Street, we kind of figure there's a great deal of truth in all of that. The second genre is that there's institutional failures. The regulators were asleep at the switch. The shadow banking system innovated outside of their purview, etc., 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 and therefore the institutions have to be reconfigured, and it has to be a global effort by the G20, something of that kind. So we look at the institutional level and say that has failed and that has to be reconfigured. The third genre is to say everybody was obsessed with a false theory. They read too much Hayek and believed in the efficiency of markets, and it's time we actually got back to something like Keynes, or we took seriously Hyman Minsky's theory about the inherent instability of financial activities. The next genre is that it has cultural origins. Now, we don't hear that much in the United States, but if you were in Germany and France, many people there would kind of say this is an Anglo-Saxon disease. And it's nothing to do with us. I happened to be in Brazil when it was going on, and Lula was kind of saying, well, first off he was saying, oh, thank God the United States has been disciplined by the equivalent of the IMF. We've been through it 8 times in the last 25 years, and now it's their turn. Fantastic, said Lula, and all the Latin Americans I knew, until it hit them, which it does. And then they kind of changed their tune a little bit. So there's a kind of a way of which it became cultural. And you can see that, by the way, in which this whole Greek thing is being handled. The way the German press is saying, well, it's the Greek character, it's defects in the Greek character, and there's a lot of rather nasty stuff going on around that. But actually there are some cultural features which have led into it. For instance, the US fascination with home ownership, which is supposedly a deep cultural value. So 68% of US households are homeowners. It's only 22% in Switzerland. Of course, it's a cultural value in the United States that's been supported by the mortgage interest tax deduction, which is a huge subsidy. It's been promoted since the 1930s. Very explicitly in the 1930s, it was built up because the theory was that debt-encumbered homeowners don't go on strike. And then there's a kind of notion that there's a failure of policy, and that policy has actually intervened. And there's a funny kind of alliance emerging between the Glenn Beck wing of Fox News and the World Bank, both of whom say the problem is too much regulation of the wrong sort. I don't see us debating and discussing this. I don't have the solutions. I think I know what the nature of the problem is. And unless we're prepared to have a very broad-based discussion that gets away from, the normal kind of pablum you get in the political campaign and, everything's going to be okay here next year if you vote for me, it's crap. You should know it's crap and say it is. And we have a duty, it seems to me, those of us who are academics and seriously involved in the world, to actually change our mode of thinking.